My husband looked me in the eyes and screamed, "Go to hell with that brat." But when the judge finished reading the judgment, the entire courtroom fell into a deathly silence. Even Michael's expensive lawyer, with his impeccable $2,000 suit, turned pale. In 22 years of marriage, I had never seen my husband with that expression, half shock, half terror. And for the first time in years, I truly smiled. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching from? We love to know how far our stories travel. Everything fell apart 3 months ago, on an ordinary Tuesday. I was finishing up dinner preparations when Michael came home earlier than usual. It was strange. He normally stayed at the office until 9 o'clock at night, sometimes later. In recent years, we rarely had dinner together. I remember I was chopping carrots when he walked into the kitchen. "We need to talk, Eleanor." Something in the coldness of his voice made a pit form in my stomach. I put down the knife, wiped my hands on my apron, and sat at the table. Michael remained standing, arms crossed, not looking at me directly. "I'm leaving." 2 words, just like that, as if he were telling me he was going to the grocery store. "What?" was all I could say. "I don't want this marriage anymore. It's over. I don't feel what I used to. I'm in love with someone else." The world stopped. 22 years of life together, reduced to a few sentences thrown like rocks at my face. I looked at the man in front of me, trying to recognize the young man I fell in love with 2 decades ago. I couldn't. "Who is she?" I asked, surprised by the calmness in my voice. "Does it matter?" "To me, it matters." He sighed, irritated. "Jessica, my assistant." Of course, the 27-year-old he had hired 6 months ago. Pretty, with that vibrant energy I had lost somewhere between raising our son, taking care of the house, and managing the finances of Michael's construction firm in the difficult early years of the business. "Michael, we have a son. We have a life together. We built all of this. And you're going to get what you deserve," he interrupted me. "I'll be fair, but my decision is made." That same night, he packed a bag and left. When Liam, our 17-year-old son, got home from a friend's house, I had to explain that his father had left us. His look of confusion turned to anger, then pain. We sat together on the sofa late into the night, in silence. The following days were a blur. Michael sent his lawyer with the divorce papers. The terms? I would get minimal alimony and a small condo in the suburbs. Everything else, the house we lived in, the construction company, the cars, the savings would stay with him. After all, according to the documents, he was the one who had worked to get all of it. I was just a stay-at-home mom. 22 years of my life, erased in an instant. As if I hadn't sacrificed my career so he could build his. As if I hadn't sold my grandmother's jewelry to finance his first venture when we were starting out. As if I hadn't stayed up late, night after night, organizing the accounts, doing spreadsheets, handling clients while he was in the field. I consulted 3 different lawyers. They all said the same thing. It would be an uphill battle. Without documented proof of my contribution, with everything in his name, I would probably only get the minimum. Chloe, my best friend from college, was outraged. "You can't accept that." "Eleanor, he would have nothing if it weren't for you. What can I do?" "I have no way to prove it," I replied, exhausted. "Hire Miss Kaplan," she said with conviction. "She's fierce. I've seen what she does in court. If anyone can help you, it's her." Miss Kaplan was known as the lawyer for impossible cases. She didn't have the status or the resources of the firm representing Michael, but she had something more important, a passion for justice and a razor-sharp intellect. When we met, she didn't give me false hope. "It will be difficult, Mrs. Santos, but we will fight with everything we have." And so our legal battle began. We gathered all possible evidence of my contribution over the years. Testimonies from former employees who saw me working at the company. Photos from events where I was clearly participating as a business partner, not just as a wife. Records of deposits I had made into Michael's personal account at the beginning of our marriage. Meanwhile, life continued at a strange pace. Liam withdrew into himself, dedicating himself to his studies with an almost feverish intensity. Michael rarely called him. When he tried to visit, Liam refused. The wound was too deep. A month after Michael left, I went to the mall and saw her. "Jessica, walking hand in hand with him, laughing. She was wearing a bracelet I recognized immediately. I had seen it in the catalog I left open on the nightstand, a hint for our upcoming wedding anniversary. Michael was never good at picking out gifts on his own. It seemed he had learned with her. I hid behind a column, feeling my heart break all over again. 22 years, replaced in the blink of an eye. That night, I cried until I had no tears left. Then I got up, looked at myself in the mirror, and made a promise to myself. I would not be defeated. Not after everything I sacrificed. The divorce proceedings dragged on. Michael became more and more aggressive in the negotiations, as if every passing day made him more determined to leave me with nothing. The man who once promised me eternal love now seemed to hate me with the same intensity. He's scared, Miss Kaplan told me one afternoon. Men like your husband become dangerous when they feel they're losing control. And then, 2 weeks before the final hearing, I received an unexpected phone call, a male voice with a foreign accent. Mrs. Eleanor Santos, my name is Mr. Alistair Finch. I am the executor of the will of your great-uncle, Arthur Villegas. There must be a mistake, I replied. I don't have an uncle with that name. He was your maternal grandmother's brother. He lived most of his life in Portugal, passed away a month ago, and left a rather specific will. I vaguely remembered my mother mentioning a great-uncle who had emigrated when he was young. I never met him personally. And what does that have to do with me, mister? Arthur left his entire fortune to you, madam, his only great niece. Silence. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Fortune? What fortune? Properties in Lisbon and the Algarve, various investments, some shares in companies. The preliminary valuation indicates an estate of approximately 4 million euros, over 80 million Mexican pesos. Over 80 million pesos. I felt the world spin. Wait, the prompt says to use dollars. Let's recalculate. 4M euros is to 4. 3M USD. I'll use that. The preliminary valuation indicates an estate of approximately 4 million euros, nearly $5 million. I felt the world spin. Why? Why me? In his will, mister, Arthur mentions that 30 years ago, when he visited Austin, you were the only person in the family who received him with genuine affection. You were very young. Perhaps you don't even remember. And then, like a flash, I remembered. An old man visiting our house when I was about 12. My parents were always busy, barely had time for him. But I loved listening to his stories about Portugal, about the sea and the trips he took. I spent a whole week showing him the city, taking him to places I thought were beautiful, listening to his advice and adventures. Mr. Arthur never forgot your kindness, Mr. Finch continued. He followed your life from a distance. He knew about your marriage, the birth of your son. He stayed informed through distant relatives. A single week of childish kindness, 3 decades ago. And now, this. The documents will be formally presented to the American court next week. As the inheritance was received after the separation, in fact, it does not enter into the division of assets in your divorce. It is exclusively yours. When I hung up, I sat on the sofa, stunned. An hour later, Miss Kaplan called me, euphoric. You're not going to believe this. The Portuguese lawyer just contacted me. Eleanor, this changes everything. And it really did. The morning of the final hearing, the sky was overcast. Heavy clouds threatened a storm, perfectly matching the atmosphere inside the courthouse. My stomach was a knot of anxiety as I adjusted the skirt of my only decent suit, bought years ago for Michael's company events, where I appeared as the dedicated wife. Beside me, Miss Kaplan maintained her composure, but her eyes shone with a fierce determination. Liam had insisted on coming with me despite my protests. At 17, he looked older, his face hardened by the disappointment in his father. Mom, I'll be by your side, he told me as we crossed the courthouse doors. Always. Those words were the only comfort I had at that moment. When we entered the courtroom, Michael was already there, sitting next to his lawyer, Mr. Harrington, a middle-aged man with a reputation for being ruthless in legal circles. And next to Michael, to my surprise, Jessica. She wore a tight dress, her hair impeccably styled, looking at me with a mixture of triumph and disdain. The audacity, I thought, bringing the mistress to the divorce. Michael didn't look at me directly. In the last 3 months, he had transformed into a complete stranger. The man who for years shared my bed now seemed unable to hold my gaze for more than 2 seconds. The judge entered. Judge Davis, a woman of about 60, with penetrating eyes and a stern expression. She began the proceedings efficiently, reviewing the facts of the case. Mr. Harrington was the first to speak, presenting his case with arrogant confidence. Your Honor, the facts are simple. My client, Mr. Michael Santos, built a successful company on his own through his tireless work and entrepreneurial vision. Mrs. Eleanor, although she was a present wife and mother, did not contribute financially to the acquisition of the assets. I felt my blood boil. Miss Kaplan squeezed my hand under the table, signaling me to stay calm. My client's offer is more than generous, he continued. A 2-bedroom condo and a monthly alimony adequate for Mrs. Eleanor's needs. As for the Santos construction firm, there is no discussion. It was the exclusive fruit of Mr. Michael's work. When Miss Kaplan stood up to present our case, her voice was firm and clear. Your Honor, the version presented by my esteemed colleague is, to say the least, a gross distortion of reality. Mrs. Eleanor not only supported her husband emotionally all these years, but she was a fundamental part of the company's success. She presented our testimonies, photos, circumstantial evidence of my contribution. As she spoke, I noticed Michael becoming increasingly restless, whispering furiously with his lawyer. Furthermore, Miss Kaplan continued, I would like to present a new fact that directly influences this case. It was at that moment that the courtroom door opened and Mr. Alistair Finch entered, carrying an elegant briefcase. Michael turned abruptly to see who the newcomer was, frowning in confusion. With your Honor's permission, Miss Kaplan said, I would like to call Mr. Alistair Finch, executor of the will of Mr. Arthur Villegas, my client's great-uncle. The judge nodded, and Mr. Finch approached, handing official documents to the magistrate. She examined them carefully, her eyebrows rising as she read. These documents prove that Mrs. Eleanor Santos is the sole heir to a considerable fortune, valued at approximately 4 million euros, Mr. Finch explained. The inheritance includes properties in Portugal, diversified investments, and shares in companies, all legally documented, with taxes duly paid. The judge studied the documents for long minutes. The entire courtroom remained silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, the woman who, seconds before, was being portrayed as a dependent housewife and now appeared as the heiress to a fortune. I would like to clarify, Miss Kaplan added, that this inheritance was received after the de facto separation, therefore, it is not part of the assets to be divided in the divorce. It belongs exclusively to my client. That's when it happened. Michael shot up abruptly, his face contorted in a mixture of shock and fury. This is a farce, he shouted. She's lying. There's no uncle. There's no inheritance. Mr. Santos, control yourself, the judge warned severely. But Michael was beside himself. He pointed a finger at me, shaking with rage. Take your son out of here and go to hell. This is a setup. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the court reporter stopped typing, hands suspended over the keyboard. You miserable traitor. The words escaped my mouth before I could stop them. The judge banged her gavel hard. Mr. Santos, one more comment like that, and you will be removed from this courtroom and fined for contempt. Sit down immediately. Michael sat down, still trembling. Jessica was pale, looking at him as if she were seeing a stranger. Mr. Harrington was desperately trying to calm his client, whispering quickly in his ear. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked directly at me. Mrs. Santos, do you confirm that you are the sole heir of Mr. Arthur Villegas and that this inheritance was received after the de facto separation of the couple? Yes, Your Honor, I replied, my voice surprisingly firm. She nodded, examined the documents again, and then announced, in light of this new information and the evidence presented by the defense regarding Mrs. Eleanor's contribution to the construction of the family patrimony, this court determines a 30-minute recess so that I can properly review the case before issuing the judgment. As the judge retreated, I felt Liam's hand squeeze mine. I looked at my son and saw his eyes were moist, but a small smile was forming on his lips. On the other side of the room, Michael seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He alternated between staring into space and shooting furious glances at me. Jessica had moved slightly away from him, constantly checking her phone, as if looking for an escape route. "Are you okay, Miss?" Kaplan asked quietly. I didn't know how to answer. I was stunned, exhausted, relieved, and terrified all at the same time. The last 3 months had been a nightmare, and now, suddenly, the script had completely changed. "I think so," I managed to say. The recess seemed to last an eternity. Liam went to get me some water while Miss Kaplan reviewed her notes. On the other side of the room, Michael and his lawyer were in a heated discussion. At one point, Jessica stood up abruptly and left the courtroom without looking back. Michael didn't even seem to notice. When the judge returned, the courtroom was plunged back into silence. She settled into her chair, looked at both sides, and began to speak. "This court has carefully analyzed all the evidence presented. It is clear that Mrs. Eleanor Santos contributed significantly to the construction of the family patrimony, not only through domestic work and child rearing, but also with direct participation in the couple's business, especially in the initial years." Michael shifted in his chair but remained silent. Furthermore, the judge continued, "Mr. Michael Santos's conduct during this process shows a lack of respect not only for his ex-wife, but also for this court." She paused, as if carefully choosing her next words. "Therefore, I determine the division of assets as follows. The Santos construction firm will be divided in a proportion of 60% for Mr. Michael and 40% for Mrs. Eleanor, thus recognizing her contribution. The main house will remain with Mrs. Eleanor, where she can reside with her minor son. The other assets will be divided equally." The courtroom fell into a deep silence. The judge continued, her firm voice echoing through the room. "As for the inheritance received by Mrs. Eleanor, as it was acquired after the de facto separation, it is not part of the division of assets and belongs exclusively to her." I looked at Michael. His face had lost all color. The man who for years made me feel small, invisible, now seemed diminished, cornered. Furthermore, the judge went on, "Considering Mr. Santos's inappropriate behavior during these hearings, he will be responsible for all court costs and attorney's fees." She banged the gavel once, sealing the fate Michael had carved out for himself. "Court is adjourned." Miss Kaplan hugged me tightly. "We did it, Eleanor. We did it." I was still processing what had happened when I noticed Michael approaching, Mr. Harrington desperately trying to restrain him. Liam instinctively stepped between us. "Better not, Dad," he said with a coldness I had never heard from him before. Michael ignored his son, his eyes fixed on me. The hatred was gone, replaced by something even more disturbing. Desperation. "Eleanor," his voice was different, almost pleading. "Can we talk? We need to resolve this like adults." Miss Kaplan stepped forward. "Any communication with my client must be made through my office, Mr. Santos." "That's ridiculous," he exclaimed. 22 years together, and now you won't even talk to me?" Something broke inside me. 22 years together, and he had thrown it all away as if it meant nothing. We had built a life, a family, and he destroyed it all for a whim. "Now you want to talk?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Now? After treating me like garbage for months? After trying to leave me with nothing? After not even calling your own son?" "I made a mistake," he whispered, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Jessica just broke up with me. She said this isn't what she wanted. Eleanor, please, can we start over?" I stared at that man, the same brown eyes that once made me lose sleep, the same smile that won me over. But now all I saw was a stranger. "No, Michael, we can't." I turned around and walked out of the courthouse with Liam and Miss Kaplan. Outside, the sky had cleared. The threatening storm had given way to a sunny afternoon, a perfect symbol of how I felt. In the following weeks, my life transformed completely. Mr. Finch helped me with all the paperwork related to the inheritance. Miss Kaplan oversaw the division of assets from the divorce. Michael tried to contact me several times, but I kept my distance. It was as if a chapter of my life had finally closed. Liam was lighter. He continued to be dedicated to his studies, but he started smiling again, going out with friends, planning the future. I'm thinking of studying architecture, he told me one night at dinner. I thought you wanted to go into pre-med. That was to please Dad, he admitted. Architecture has always been what I wanted. A month after the hearing, Mr. Finch invited me to go to Portugal to see the properties that now belong to me. At first, I hesitated. I had never traveled abroad. I had never done something so big on my own. You should go, Liam insisted. See a bit of the world. You spent so much time taking care of everyone that you forgot to live, Mom. He was right. For years, I lived for others. First Michael, then Liam, then the company. I always put my needs, my dreams, last. We decided we would make the trip together during his school vacation. It would be our first big adventure, just the two of us. Before leaving, one last loose end needed to be tied up. Michael had asked to meet at a neutral coffee shop to talk civilly. Miss Kaplan advised me to accept. It was better to keep things amicable, especially for Liam's sake. I chose a busy coffee shop downtown. I arrived a few minutes early and ordered a cappuccino. Michael showed up on time looking haggard. The elegant suit he used to wear now seemed too big for his frame. "Thanks for coming," he said, sitting across from me. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Eleanor, I know I messed up. I was selfish, cruel. I have no excuses." I remained silent. What answer could I give to that? Jessica, she was only interested in the money. As soon as she realized I would lose a significant part of the company, she disappeared. I saw her last week with one of our richest clients. I felt a twinge of pity, but I was surprised to realize there was no longer any resentment, just a deep indifference. "What do you want, Michael?" He took a deep breath. "I wanted to know if there's any chance, any possibility that we could get back together, that we could be a family again." I looked at the man who was once the center of my universe. I remembered the good years, the shared dreams, the struggles and achievements. But I also remembered the ease with which he threw it all away, the cruelty with which he treated me, the coldness with which he ignored his own son. "No, Michael, we can't," he lowered his eyes. "Are you going to sell your part of the company?" So that was it. He was worried about the business. "I haven't decided yet," I answered honestly. "For now, I'll keep my shares. The company is doing well, and it's a good investment." He nodded, seeming both relieved and disappointed. "And Portugal? Are you really going?" "Yes, Liam and I leave next month. We're going to see the properties, spend some time there." "Are you moving there?" "I don't know, Michael. I'm learning not to plan the future so much, to live one day at a time." We finished our coffee in silence. When we said goodbye on the sidewalk, there was a finality to the moment that we both felt. "Take care, Eleanor," he said. "You too, Michael." I walked away without looking back. A part of me was sad, not for the end of the marriage, but for the end of an era, for the dreams that would never be realized, for the plans that would never get off the paper. But another part, a part that was growing every day, was hopeful. For the first time in decades, my future was mine to shape. I was no longer just Michael's wife, Liam's mother. I was Eleanor, a woman with resources, with possibilities, with a whole world to explore. The night before our trip, Liam and I had dinner at home, the same house I almost lost, which was now truly ours. We had redecorated a few rooms, changed the furniture arrangement, transforming the space into something new. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Liam said suddenly, "for how you handled all this, for how you didn't give up." I smiled at my son, this young man who had become my rock during the hardest times. "I learned that we are stronger than we think," I replied, "and that it's never too late to start over." Later, alone in my room, I looked at the half-packed suitcase on the bed. Passport, documents, clothes, all ready for a journey I never imagined taking. Next to the suitcase, a photo of when I was 12, with my great-uncle Arthur. I barely remembered that meeting, but apparently that week of childish kindness had deeply marked the man. Small acts of kindness, I thought. We never know how they come back to us. That night I slept without dreaming, without nightmares, without waking up startled as I had for months. For the first time in a long time, I slept with the certainty that, regardless of what the future held, I would be okay. The next morning, we left for the airport. A new life was waiting on the other side of the ocean. maybe temporary, maybe permanent. The important thing was that, for the first time, the choice was mine. "Ready?" Liam asked as we boarded. I smiled, squeezing his hand. More than ever. The plane took off, leaving behind the city that had been my home my entire life. Through the window, I saw the clouds, the infinite sky, and felt a freedom I had never experienced before. Michael had told me to go to hell, but instead, I found my own paradise. Portugal welcomed us with bright sunshine and a deep blue sky I had never seen. The air had a different scent, a mix of sea breeze, flowers, and something indefinable that I could only describe as new, Mr. Finch was waiting for us at the Lisbon airport, an elegant man in his 50s with a kind smile and attentive eyes. He led us to a gleaming black car where a uniformed driver was already waiting. "Welcome to Portugal," Mr. Finch said as we settled into the back seat. "Mr. Arthur would be very happy to know that you will finally see his properties, Mrs. Eleanor." It was still strange to hear that. His properties. As if I, a woman from Austin, who until 3 months ago was fighting not to lose her own home, was suddenly the owner of real estate on another continent. I loved Lisbon immediately. The old buildings with their colorful facades, the cobblestone streets that wound up and down steep hills, the yellow trams that looked like something out of an old movie. It was like being in another world, in another time. Our first stop was an apartment in Chiado, one of the most elegant neighborhoods in the city. The 19th century building had a facade of blue and white tiles. The doorman greeted us with respect, as if he already knew who I was. When Mr. Finch opened the apartment door, I gasped. It was spacious and bright, with high windows overlooking a stunning view of the Tagus River. The furniture was old but well preserved, an elegant mix of traditional Portuguese pieces and some more modern items. This was Mr. Arthur's main home for many years, Mr. Finch explained as he guided us through the space. He loved this place. He said he could feel the heart of Lisbon beating here. I walked to one of the windows and looked out at the city spread before me, so different from everything I knew, so far from my previous reality. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Liam was exploring the apartment with enthusiasm, opening doors, looking at every detail. "Mom, it has 3 bedrooms, and look at the size of this kitchen." Mr. Finch smiled, clearly pleased with our reaction. "There's more," he said. Mr. Arthur also owned a house in the Algarve, on the south coast, a beautiful place to rest, and there's the share in the winery in the Douro region. The winery in the Douro took me by surprise. "A winery? I don't know anything about wine." Mr. Finch laughed. "Don't worry, there are competent managers taking care of everything for years. The winery runs very well even without the owner's direct supervision. It generates a considerable profit, in fact." In the following days, Mr. Finch showed us each property, each investment. The house in the Algarve was a seaside villa with white walls and a lush garden. The winery in the Douro was set on gentle hills, covered in vineyards, that descended to the river in perfectly aligned terraces. In each place, the employees and managers received us with respect and curiosity. To them, I was the mysterious great niece who had inherited everything. I imagined they wondered how an ordinary woman from Austin had suddenly become the owner of part of their country. At the winery, the head winemaker, Mr. Henderson, guided us through a tasting while explaining the production process. "This particular wine," he said, offering us a glass of a robust red, was Mr. Arthur's favorite. "It's produced with grapes grown in the oldest vines on the property." I tasted the wine, feeling its complex flavor, the way it evolved in my mouth. I had never been a wine connoisseur. Michael always chose what we drank, usually to impress his clients. But there was something in that moment that touched my soul. "It's extraordinary," I commented sincerely. Mr. Henderson smiled with approval. "You have a good palate, like your uncle." After a week of exploring the properties and meeting the people who worked in them, Mr. Finch invited us to dinner at his home in Lisbon. It was an elegant but cozy apartment where his wife Maria welcomed us like old friends. During dinner, he handed me a small wooden box. "Mr. Arthur left this specifically for you, to be delivered when you first visited Portugal." I opened the box carefully. Inside was an antique gold pocket watch with engraved initials and an envelope. I opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter, with elegant but slightly shaky calligraphy. My dear Eleanor, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally seen Portugal and the properties that are now yours. I hope you liked what you saw. You may be wondering why I left everything to you, a great niece I barely knew. The answer is simple: because you saw me. When I visited Austin so many years ago, you were the only person who truly saw me as a human being, not just as a distant relative or an obligation. You showed me your city with pride. You told me your dreams. You listened to my stories when everyone else was too busy. For a 12-year-old girl, you showed extraordinary compassion and generosity of spirit. Over the years, I followed your life from a distance. I saw you get married, have your son, build a life. I knew about the difficulties you faced. I admired your silent resilience. This watch belonged to my father, your great-grandfather. Carry it as a reminder that time is the only truly valuable asset we possess. Use it wisely, Eleanor. Live every moment. Build the life you desire, not the one others expect of you. With affection, your Uncle Arthur. Tears were running down my face when I finished reading. Liam, sitting next to me, put his arm around my shoulders. "Are you okay, Mom?" I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, I looked at Mr. Finch and Maria. "Did he really watch me all these years?" Mr. Finch confirmed. Mr. Arthur had some distant relatives in Austin who kept him informed. He cared a lot about you, although he chose not to intervene directly in your life. He used to say that each person must chart their own path. I looked at the watch in my hand, feeling its weight, its history, an object that had crossed generations to reach me. "Thank you for sharing this with me," I told Mr. Finch, for helping me get to know a little more about the man who changed my life without me even knowing it. On the way back to the apartment in Lisbon, I was silent, absorbing everything I had experienced, everything I had learned. Liam respected my silence, looking out the window at the city lights passing like shooting stars. "What would you think if we stayed longer?" I asked suddenly. Liam turned to me, surprised. "Like, extend the trip?" "Not just that." I was thinking, what if we spent a year here? You could do your senior year of high school at an international school. I could learn to manage the properties, get to know this place better. Liam was thoughtful for a moment. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "That would be awesome, Mom. I'd love that. Are you sure? It would be a big change. You'd be away from your friends." "Mom," he interrupted gently, "after everything we've been through, I think a change is exactly what we need. Besides, I can keep in touch with my friends online, and it would be a unique experience before college." His enthusiasm was contagious. I felt a wave of gratitude for having such an understanding son, so open to possibilities. The next morning, I discussed the idea with Mr. Finch. He didn't seem surprised. In fact, I was hoping you would consider that possibility. Mr. Arthur always imagined you might want to build a new life here. He explained that, as an American citizen, I could apply for residency in Portugal based on my investments in the country. Liam could enroll in the international school the next semester. As for the properties in Austin, the house and my share in the construction company could be managed remotely with the help of trusted professionals. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We returned to Austin to organize everything: enrolling Liam in a school in Lisbon, preparing documents for our move, arranging the house. Miss Kaplan helped me with the legal side, ensuring my interests in the construction company were protected while I was away. We hired an administrator to oversee my part of the business. Michael reacted with disbelief when he learned of our plans. "Portugal? You're really taking our son to another country?" "Yes, Michael. Liam is excited about the idea. It will be an enriching experience for him before college." "And the construction company? Are you going to abandon the business we built?" That irritated me. After everything he had done, after trying to cut me out completely, now he spoke as if we were partners. I hired a competent administrator to oversee my interests. The company will continue to function normally. He seemed to want to say more, but held back. Maybe he had finally realized that he no longer had the right to question my decisions. Chloe was the hardest to convince. My friend of so many years cried when I told her I was leaving. Who's going to have coffee with me on Tuesdays? Who's going to listen to me complain about work? I hugged her tightly. We'll video call every week. And you have to visit. The beaches in the Algarve are incredible. You're going to love them. She wiped her tears and tried to smile. Promise? I promise. This isn't goodbye, Chloe. It's just a see you later. The night before our final departure for Portugal, Liam and I had dinner at home. The last meal we would have there for a long time. The house was practically empty, most of the furniture sold or donated. We kept only a few special pieces that would be shipped to Lisbon. We sat on the living room floor, eating pizza straight from the box, like we used to on movie nights when Liam was younger. You know, Mom, he said between bites, I never imagined our life would change so much in such a short time. I smiled, thinking how true that was. Just a few months ago, I was desperate, fighting not to lose everything. Now, we were about to start a new life on another continent. Life is unpredictable, I replied. Sometimes, the worst situations end up taking us down paths we never dreamed of. Like Dad leaving us, Liam said, his voice neutral, stating a fact without the resentment that once dominated him. Yes, it was painful, terrible, but it brought us here. Liam took the last slice of pizza. Do you think we'll adapt there? I think so. It will be different, of course. We'll have to learn a lot of new things, but it will also be exciting. And what are you going to do with the winery? And with the other properties? It was a question I had been asking myself. Until a few months ago, my life was managing the house, helping at the company when Michael allowed it, and taking care of Liam. Now, suddenly, I was a businesswoman with properties on 2 continents. I'm going to learn, I answered honestly. I'm going to study, listen to the people who already work there, understand how everything works before making any decisions. Liam nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. I'm proud of you, Mom. A lot of people would have fallen apart after what Dad did, but you got stronger. His words touched my heart. During the years of marriage, I slowly lost my identity, my confidence. I became Michael's wife, an accessory in his life. The painful divorce, the fight for my rights, and now this unexpected inheritance forced me to rediscover who I was, what I wanted. Thanks, son. That means a lot to me. We slept on the floor that night, on makeshift mattresses, like campers in our own home. At dawn, the taxi arrived to take us to the airport. I gave one last look at the house where I lived for so many years, where I raised my son, where I laughed and cried. Goodbye, I whispered, closing the door for the last time. The first year in Portugal was a period of adaptation and discovery. Lisbon, with its 7 hills and view of the Tagus River, became our new home. The apartment in Chiado, which initially seemed so foreign and impressive, gradually transformed into a cozy space filled with our own memories. Liam adapted with the characteristic ease of youth. The international school was multicultural, with students from dozens of different countries. Before long, he had formed a new circle of friends and was learning European Portuguese, laughing at the differences between our American accent and the local one. They think we talk like we're singing, he told me one day, imitating the Portuguese accent with comic exaggeration. For me, the adaptation was more gradual. There were so many things to learn, so many new responsibilities. Mr. Finch became my guide in the labyrinth of owning multiple businesses. I hired a financial advisor recommended by him, a Portuguese man educated in London named David, who had a knack for explaining complex concepts in a simple and clear way. You have a very solid financial position, David explained in our first meeting. The properties are well maintained, the businesses are profitable, and the investments are diversified. Mr. Arthur had an excellent sense for business. Under his guidance, I began to better understand the empire I had inherited. The winery was particularly fascinating. I visited it monthly, spending days learning about viticulture, the winemaking process, the history of the region. Mr. Henderson, initially reserved, gradually opened up, sharing not only his technical knowledge but also the stories and traditions of the Douro. On one of these visits, he took me to a small cellar where they kept special bottles. This is our treasure, he said, showing rows of dusty bottles. Some of these vintages are over 50 years old. I looked at the bottles with reverence, lightly touching their yellowed labels. Mr. Arthur liked to say that a good wine is like life, Mr. Henderson continued. It needs time, patience, and sometimes a bit of luck with the weather. But mostly, it needs love. Those words stayed with me. Time, patience, luck, love. Wasn't that exactly what I was trying to rebuild? My life, after the storm of the divorce, needed those same elements. I began to get more actively involved in the winery's management. Not that I had technical knowledge. That was Mr. Henderson's and his team's job. But I started thinking strategically about the business. We hired a digital marketing specialist to expand our online presence. We opened the property to limited tourist visits, offering exclusive tastings. We sponsored cultural events in Lisbon and Porto. Slowly, the brand began to gain recognition. Sales increased. Mr. Henderson, initially skeptical of my American ideas, as he called them, began to look at me with new respect. "You have an instinct for business, like your uncle," he commented one afternoon as we reviewed the quarterly results. Those words meant more to me than he could imagine. For years, Michael had excluded me from any decision related to the construction company, insisting that I didn't understand business, that my place was at home. Discovering that I did, in fact, have a talent for management was like reclaiming a part of myself that had been denied for so long. At home, Liam and I established a new routine. We had dinner together every night, sharing the day's experiences. On weekends, we explored Portugal, the beaches of the Algarve, the medieval villages of the interior, the historic monuments of Lisbon and its surroundings. It was as if we were discovering the world together, mother and son, partners in this new adventure. The house in the Algarve became our refuge during school holidays. Situated in a small cove with direct access to an almost private beach, it was a place of absolute tranquility. Liam loved swimming in the crystal-clear sea, exploring the nearby cliffs, or just relaxing under the Mediterranean sunday. It was there, on a golden summer afternoon, that he told me he had been accepted into the architecture program at the University of Lisbon. "They loved my portfolio," he said, unable to contain his smile, especially the drawings I did here in the Algarve. I hugged him tightly, my heart overflowing with pride. My son, who had faced his father's rejection, the turmoil of divorce, the move to another country, was thriving, following his own path. "Does your father know?" I asked gently. Liam shrugged. I sent him an email. He replied that he's happy for me, but still thinks pre-med would be a safer choice. Typical of Michael, I thought, always wanting to control, always believing he knew what was best for others. "And what do you think?" Liam asked, watching me closely. "I think you should follow what you love," I replied without hesitation. Life is too short to do something that doesn't make you happy just because it seems safe or because other people think it's the right thing. Liam's smile widened. "I thought you'd say that." As I watched my son swim in the sparkling sea, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. The pain we felt, the tears we shed, seemed to belong to another life, another time, not that I had forgotten. The scar of Michael's betrayal would always be there, but it didn't hurt in the same way anymore. In Lisbon, my social life also began to flourish. I made friends with other expatriates, an American painter, a pair of French chefs, an English writer. Through them, I met local Portuguese, was included in dinners, gallery openings, poetry readings. It was at one of these events, a photography exhibition in a small gallery in Alfama, that I met Robert. Not my great-uncle, but a university professor of Portuguese literature, with graying temples and intelligent blue eyes. He approached me as I was observing a black and white photograph of the Tagus River during a storm. "It's amazing how the same landscape can look so different depending on the light, isn't it?" he commented in Portuguese. I turned, surprised as much by the observation as by the American accent. "Are you from the States?" He smiled. "No, I'm Portuguese, but I spent a few years teaching at a university in Mexico City." The accent stuck a bit. We talked for almost an hour, discovering common interests in literature, music, wine. He knew the Douro well. His family was originally from the region and was intrigued when I mentioned the winery. "Mendeiros? That wine is extraordinary. I'm impressed." At the end of the night, he asked for my phone number. I hesitated for a moment. Since the divorce, I hadn't considered the possibility of meeting someone new. But there was something about Robert, his kindness, his unpretentious intelligence, the respect with which he treated me that made me give him a chance. Our first date was lunch at a small restaurant on the riverbank. We talked for hours, discovering more about each other. Robert was a widower of 5 years, had 2 adult children who lived in Porto. He loved his job as a professor, but dreamed of writing a novel one day. "And you?" he asked. "What brought you to Portugal?" I told him a condensed version of my story. The difficult divorce, the unexpected inheritance, the decision to start over in a new country. "That must have been difficult," he commented, his eyes full of genuine understanding. "It was, but it was also liberating. I discovered a strength I didn't know I had." He smiled. "That's evident. You rebuilt your life in a foreign country. You're managing complex businesses, raising your son alone. It's admirable." I felt my face flush. I wasn't used to sincere compliments. Michael, in the last years of our marriage, had become a master of disguised little criticisms, comments that mined my confidence so subtly I barely noticed. Robert was different. There was an authenticity to him that was refreshing. He wasn't trying to impress. He didn't have a hidden agenda. He was simply himself, a mature man, with his own scars and stories, interested in knowing mine. After that lunch, we started seeing each other regularly. Movies, concerts, walks through the city. I took him to visit the winery in the Douro, where he chatted animatedly with Mr. Henderson about old vintages. I introduced him to Liam, who initially showed the expected caution, but soon was charmed by Robert's easygoing nature and his encyclopedic knowledge of Portuguese architecture. 6 months after we met, Robert invited me for a weekend in Sintra, a charming town outside Lisbon, known for its romantic palaces and mysterious forests. We stayed in a historic inn overlooking the mountains. On the first night, after a candlelit dinner, he took my hand across the table. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." My heart sped up. For a moment, the old fear surfaced. Would it be another rejection? Another abandonment? "I'm in love with you," he said simply. "I didn't expect this to happen again in my life. After Maria died, I thought that part of me had died too. But you," he paused, searching for the right words. "You brought the light back." I felt tears in my eyes. Not of sadness, but of a happiness that almost hurt. "I'm in love with you too," I replied, my voice almost a whisper. That night, under the Portuguese stars, I felt as if a cycle had completed. The abandonment, the pain, the struggle, everything had led me here, to this moment of unexpected happiness. When we returned to Lisbon, I told Liam about the development of my relationship with Robert. We sat on the terrace of our apartment, watching the sun set over the Tagus. "Are you happy, Mom?" he asked after hearing my confession. "Yes," I answered honestly. "Very happy." He smiled, that smile that lit up his whole face. "Then I'm happy for you. Robert is a great guy, and you deserve someone like him." "Like me?" "Yeah, strong, smart, resilient. You know, after everything we went through, you could have become bitter, untrusting. But you didn't. You stayed open to life, to possibilities. That's incredible." I looked at my son with admiration. When had he become so wise? So understanding? "Do you think it's too soon?" I asked, insecure. "After your father?" Liam shook his head. "Mom, you spent years unhappy with Dad, even before he left. Now you've found someone who makes you happy. Why wait?" I hugged him, grateful to have such a mature and generous son. 2 years had passed since we moved to Portugal. Lisbon was no longer a foreign city to us, but a home. We knew its secret corners, its hidden cafes, its traditions. European Portuguese no longer sounded strange to our ears, although we proudly maintained our American accent. Liam was in his 2nd year of the architecture program, excelling in his studies. He had even interned at a prestigious architecture firm over the summer, where his talent for drawing and his creative vision were quickly noticed. My relationship with Robert flourished. He had become a constant presence in our lives, a partner in the truest sense of the word. We didn't live together, we both valued our individual spaces, but we spent most nights and weekends together. The winery prospered under my renewed management. We had launched a new line of wines that received enthusiastic reviews and significantly increased our international sales. Even Mr. Henderson, traditionalist as he was recognized the value of the changes we implemented. On an autumn afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Miss Kaplan, my lawyer in Austin. "Eleanor, I hope all is well with you and Liam in Portugal. I have news you should know. The Santos construction firm is facing serious financial difficulties. According to information from the administrator you hired, Michael made a series of risky investments that didn't pay off. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Michael tried to sell your share, the 40% you hold, without your authorization, but was legally blocked. Now he is desperate for capital to save the business. I thought you should know before he tried to contact you directly, Miss Kaplan." I stared at the screen, stunned. The Santos construction firm, the business I helped build from the beginning, that represented years of my life, was about to collapse. I didn't feel joy at the news, as perhaps the Michael of 2 years ago would expect. I didn't feel satisfaction knowing he was failing without me. I felt only a deep sadness for all the waste, of effort, of potential, of shared dreams. As Miss Kaplan predicted, Michael's email arrived the next day. The tone was desperate, almost pleading, something I never imagined coming from the arrogant man who humiliated me in the courthouse. "Eleanor, I hope this email finds you well. I imagine Miss Kaplan has already informed you about the company's situation. We are facing an unprecedented crisis due to some investments that did not yield the expected return. I need your help. With your share of the company as collateral, we can obtain the necessary financing to get through this difficult time. Please, consider this not only for our shared past, but for the future of the company we built together. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, after everything, but I am begging you, not for me, but for the employees who depend on these jobs, for the clients who trusted us, for the legacy we built. Michael." I showed the email to Robert that night, as we had dinner at his apartment. He listened attentively, without interrupting, as I explained the history of the construction company, how much I had invested in it in the early years, how important that business had been to me. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to let it sink. It would be fair, after how he treated me. But another part of you still cares about the business," he completed softly. I nodded. "Not for Michael, but for the construction company, for the people who work there, for what it represents." Robert thought for a moment. "You could fly to Austin, see the situation for yourself before making any decisions." The idea of returning to Austin, of facing Michael face to face after so much time, was terrifying, but it also made sense. I couldn't make a decision of this magnitude from a distance, based only on emails. The next morning, I booked a flight to Austin. Liam insisted on coming with me. "Are you sure?" I asked as we packed. "It's going to be awkward." "Absolutely," he replied with determination. "I'm not letting you face Dad alone." When we arrived at the construction company's headquarters, the imposing building in the business center that was once a source of such pride, I immediately noticed the differences. The front garden was neglected. The receptionist looked stressed. The movement was minimal. The walls that once held photos of large projects now seemed empty. The entire atmosphere was heavy with a kind of silent defeat. Miss Kaplan met us in the lobby. We went up together to the top-floor meeting room, where Michael was already waiting for us. When I saw him, I almost didn't recognize him. The man who had been the center of my universe for so many years seemed to have shrunk. His hair was thinner, gray at the temples. Deep lines marked his face. His eyes, once bright and confident, seemed dull, tired. He stood up when we entered, his gaze shifting anxiously between me and Liam. "Eleanor," he said, his voice hoarse. "Liam, thank you for coming." The meeting was tense, laden with unsaid emotions. Michael explained the financial situation, essentially the same thing Miss Kaplan had already shown me, just with a layer of excuses and justifications. He talked about the investments that went wrong, the hasty decisions, the missed opportunities. He didn't mention the drinking, but I could smell a faint odor of alcohol even at that hour of the morning. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages of the presentation. "What exactly do you want from me, Michael?" I finally asked when he finished his explanation. He took a deep breath. "I need you to invest in the company. or use your share as collateral for a substantial loan. Without that, we'll have to declare bankruptcy in less than 3 months. And why would I do that? Because despite everything, this company is also your creation. You were there from the beginning, Eleanor. Remember when you sold your grandmother's earrings for our first venture? When you worked late doing the accounting? I was surprised he remembered those details he had vehemently denied during our divorce. Funny, I commented, keeping my voice neutral. In court, you said I never contributed anything, that everything was the exclusive fruit of your work. He had the decency to look ashamed. I was wrong. I was cruel and unfair to you. I said terrible things that weren't true. Like take your son and go to hell, Liam interjected, his voice icy. Michael looked at our son, pain evident in his eyes. Liam, I'm sorry. More than I can express. I was out of my mind that day. You were out of your mind for the last 3 years, Liam retorted. Before that, you were just pretending to be a father. Miss Kaplan put a hand on my arm, a silent reminder to stay focused. I nodded subtly. I'm going to need more information before making any decision. Returning to the topic, I want to see all the books, all the contracts, talk to the key managers. And I need to know what steps you took to resolve the situation on your own. Michael seemed momentarily taken aback by my direct approach, but nodded. Of course, anything you want. I have a team ready to give you full access. I spent the next 3 days immersed in the construction company's business, working 12 to 14-hour days. I reviewed every aspect of the operation, interviewed key employees, visited ongoing projects. Liam accompanied me on some of those visits, his perspective as an architecture student surprisingly valuable. The picture that emerged was bleak, but not irreversible. The construction company had solid projects underway, a good reputation with certain loyal clients, and a still competent, though demoralized, core team. The main problem was Michael, his erratic leadership, his impulsive decisions, his growing alcoholism. On the evening of the 3rd day, I sat with Liam and Miss Kaplan on Chloe's patio, discussing my options. You don't owe him anything, Miss Kaplan insisted. After how he treated you, it would be perfectly understandable to let the company sink. But it's not just Michael and his ego at stake, I argued. It's dozens of families who depend on those jobs, projects that affect entire communities. Liam, who had remained silent, finally spoke. You've already made your decision, haven't you? I looked at my son, surprised by his insight. I think so. He smiled. I knew you'd do that. Not because you're weak or because you still care about Dad, but because of who you are, someone who cares about others, who builds instead of destroys. The next day, I called a meeting with Michael and the company's board of directors. I arrived early, prepared, confident in a way I never would have been 2 years earlier. When everyone was present, I laid out my proposal. I am willing to make a substantial investment in the construction company using part of the resources I have in Portugal. In exchange, I want 70% of the shares and total control of the operation. A stunned silence followed my words. Michael looked dazed. That means, I continued, that you, Michael, will remain a minority shareholder, but you will leave executive management. I will form a new board of directors and implement a complete restructuring. You want to kick me out of my own company? Michael asked, incredulous. Out of our company? I corrected gently. And yes, out of executive management. You'll still receive dividends when the company becomes profitable again, and you can keep an honorary title if you wish. But the operational decisions will no longer go through you. The other directors looked at each other, clearly evaluating the proposal. It was no secret to anyone that Michael had become a liability for the company. Why would you do this? Michael asked, his voice almost a whisper. Why not just let it all end? Because unlike you, I never stopped believing in what we built, I answered honestly. And because there are good people who depend on these jobs. There was a long pause as Michael absorbed my words. Finally, he spoke. I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow, I replied, standing up. The offer won't be open indefinitely. I left the meeting room feeling strangely light. Regardless of Michael's decision, I had made mine. Not out of revenge or resentment, but out of a genuine desire to preserve something valuable. Liam was waiting for me in the building's lobby. "How did it go?" he asked anxiously. "We'll see tomorrow," I replied. But whatever his decision, I'm at peace with mine. We spent the rest of the day revisiting places that had been important in our past lives. The park where Liam learned to ride his bike, the ice cream shop we used to go to on Sundays, the school he attended. It was like a farewell, a final tribute to memories that, while important, no longer defined us. The next morning, I received an email from Michael. "Eleanor, I accept your terms. You were always better at this than I was anyway. The company is yours to save or transform as you see fit, Michael." Just like that, the empire he had guarded so fiercely, for which he had sacrificed our marriage, now handed over with a silent admission of defeat. Miss Kaplan helped with the necessary paperwork. Within a week, I was officially the majority shareholder and CEO of Santos Construction. I immediately began implementing changes. I brought back key employees who had been fired. I canceled unviable projects. I focused on areas where we had proven expertise. Michael kept his word and stepped away. I learned from employees that he had finally sought help for his alcoholism, checking into a rehab clinic out of town. Before returning to Portugal, I went to visit him at the clinic. It was a peaceful place, surrounded by well-tended gardens. Michael looked different, thinner, paler, but with clearer eyes than they had been at our first meeting. "Thanks for coming," he said as we sat on a garden bench. "How are you?" I asked, genuinely interested. "Surviving. One day at a time, as they say around here." He paused, looking out at the distant mountains. "You know, for a long time I believed that success was the only thing that mattered. That if I had enough money, enough power, enough respect, I'd be happy. And you weren't?" He shook his head sadly. "The more I got, the emptier I felt. I tried to fill that void with Jessica, with parties, with drinking. Nothing worked. I remained silent, letting him continue. Seeing you and Liam now, how well you're doing, how you rebuilt your lives without me, it made me realize how much I threw away. Not just the marriage, but the chance to watch my son grow up, to build something that lasted beyond money or status." There was a sincerity in his words that moved me. Not enough to change my feelings for him, not enough to erase the past, but enough to feel a kind of peace. "It's never too late to start over, Michael," I said finally. "Liam is still your son. If you've really changed, if you really want to be part of his life, maybe someday it will be possible. Not now, not immediately, but someday." He nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "It's more than I deserve." We parted with a brief handshake, not as bitter ex-spouses nor as reconciled friends, but as two people who had finally found a way to peace with their shared past. The flight back to Lisbon was calm, both Liam and I lost in our own thoughts. The visit to Austin had stirred something within us. Not regret, not nostalgia, but a kind of closure. As if the last piece of a puzzle had finally found its place, completing a picture we could now appreciate fully. Robert was waiting for us at the Lisbon airport, his face lighting up when he saw us. He hugged Liam warmly, and then wrapped me in his arms, kissing me softly. "Welcome back," he said, taking our bags. "I missed you." On the way home, we told him about our trip, the situation at the construction company, my decision to take control, the meeting with Michael at the clinic. Robert listened attentively, without judging, offering only support and understanding. "You did what you thought was right," he commented when I finished. "That's what matters." In the following days, I dove back into my life in Lisbon, now with the added responsibility of managing the construction company in Austin. Thanks to technology, I could do much of the work remotely, with occasional visits scheduled every few months. I hired a local chief operating officer, a brilliant woman named Rachel, who had been fired by Michael years before, and who brought with her renewed energy and innovative ideas. Under her direct leadership and my strategic guidance, the construction company slowly began to recover. The winery in the Douro continued to thrive. We had just won a major award in an international wine competition, further increasing our visibility in the global market. Liam was flourishing in his architecture studies, already being recognized by professors and colleagues for his exceptional talent. He had started designing a small renovation project for the winery's office, his first real commission, even if it was a commission from his own mother. My relationship with Robert deepened. He had become not only my romantic partner, but my confidant, my best friend. Our lives intertwined naturally, without rush, without pressure. On a sunny spring afternoon, we were walking on the beach near the house in the Algarve, where we were spending a long weekend. The sea was calm, a deep blue that seemed to merge with the sky on the horizon. "I've been thinking," Robert began, taking my hand as we walked barefoot on the sand, "about the future." "What kind of thoughts?" I asked, feeling a slight apprehension. Even after 2 years together, a part of me still feared losing the happiness I had found. He stopped, turning to look at me with those blue eyes that already knew every corner of my soul. "I would like to spend the rest of my life with you, Eleanor. Not necessarily married, unless you want to, but together. Maybe in this house, which you love so much, maybe traveling the world when I retire, maybe just sitting side by side, reading quietly on winter nights." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a happiness so deep it almost hurt. "I want that too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. He smiled, that smile that still made my heart race. "Then it's decided." There was no formal proposal. There was no ring. We didn't need those formalities. We were two adults who had lived enough to know what really mattered. The following week, I told Liam about our decision to live together. We were at the small coffee shop near the university where we used to meet for lunch once a week. "Robert and I are thinking about sharing a house," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Liam smiled, that smile that lit up his whole face and reminded me of the boy he had been. "It's about time, don't you think? You practically live together anyway. Are you okay with that?" He put his hand on mine. "Mom, I'm 20. I'm in college. I'll have my own apartment soon. I want you to be happy. Robert is an amazing guy. You deserve each other." I felt my heart overflow with love for this young man I had raised, so different from his father in so many important ways. "You know there will always be room for you in our house, no matter where it is, right?" "Of course I know," he replied with a confidence that moved me. "But I think it will be good for you to have your own space, your own life." We decided that the house in the Algarve would be our main home. Robert was already planning to retire from the university at the end of the academic year, and I could manage my businesses from anywhere. We would keep the apartment in Lisbon for when we needed to be in the city, for my meetings or to visit Liam. Liam himself was excited about the prospect of having the Lisbon apartment more to himself, although he knew he would always be welcome in the Algarve. Life had reached a balance I never imagined possible in the bleak days after Michael left me. I was financially independent, emotionally fulfilled, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not for what they could get from me. One afternoon, while working in my office at the Algarve house, I received an unexpected email from Michael. "Eleanor, I hope all is well with you and Liam in Portugal. Things here are gradually getting better. I completed the rehab program and have been sober for 6 months. One day at a time, as they say. The construction company is unrecognizable in the best possible way. Rachel has done an exceptional job, and your strategic guidelines have been precise. The employees are motivated again. The market reputation is recovering. I'm writing because I finally understood something you tried to show me years ago, that companies are made of people, not just numbers and contracts. That relationships matter more than status. That integrity is worth more than appearances. I never properly thanked you for saving the company when you could have just let me sink. It was an act of generosity that I didn't deserve, but for which I will be eternally grateful. I also wanted to say that, if Liam ever wants to reconnect with me, I'm here. I understand he may need time, maybe forever, and I will respect his decision, whatever it is. I wish you all the happiness in the world. Michael." I read the email several times, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was no more anger, no more resentment. Just a kind of melancholy for what could have been, for the lost years, for the wrong choices. I showed the email to Liam when he came to visit us on the weekend. He read it in silence, his face unreadable. "What do you think?" I asked gently when he finished. He thought for a moment. "It seems sincere. Do you want to reply, or maybe meet with him when we go to Austin next time?" Liam looked at the sea through the window, thoughtful. "I don't know yet. Maybe someday. But not now. I'm not ready. That's okay, I replied, hugging him. There's no rush. You decide when, and if, you want to reconnect. As I watched my son walk on the beach that afternoon, I thought about how unpredictable life was. How Michael's harsh words in the courtroom, "Take your son out of here and go to hell," had ironically paved the way for a life much richer and fuller than the one we had before. Not that we hadn't suffered. We suffered intensely. Not that we hadn't faced challenges. We faced many. But we emerged stronger, more complete, more authentic. That night, as Robert and I drank wine on the terrace, watching the sky transform into a spectacle of colors at sunset, I felt a deep peace. Not the peace of someone who never faced storms, but that of someone who learned to navigate through them and found a safe harbor. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked, noticing my contemplative silence. "About how life takes us down unexpected paths," I replied. "About how sometimes we need to lose something to find something better." He nodded, understanding without me needing to explain further. It was one of the things I loved most about him, his ability to understand the silences between my words. "You know what I think?" he said, filling our glasses again with the award-winning red wine from our winery. "I think you were never really lost, just temporarily disoriented." I smiled, reflecting on his words. Maybe he was right. Maybe, even in the darkest moments when Michael humiliated me in court, when I was fighting not to lose everything a part of me already knew I would find my way back. Not to what I was before, but to something new, something better. "To you," I toasted, raising my glass, "for helping me find my north. To us," he corrected gently, "for navigating together from here on out." As the sun disappeared over the horizon, I thought of all the people who had helped me get there. Liam, with his quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. Chloe, with her unconditional friendship. Miss Kaplan, with her fierce determination. Mr. Finch, with his kindness and guidance. Uncle Arthur, with his unexpected and transformative legacy. And yes, even Michael, whose actions, though painful, forced me to rediscover my own strength, my own identity. The courtroom had fallen silent that day, so long ago, when the judge revealed my unexpected inheritance. But the real silence, the silence of inner peace, of self-knowledge, of acceptance that I only found much later on the beaches of the Algarve, in the vineyards of the Douro, in the streets of Lisbon. And in that silence, I finally heard my own voice, clear, confident, and true. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what part made your jaw drop? Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos I don't post here. I'll see you there.